Hey friends, welcome to another live stream episode of Cheat Codes for House and Techno producers. Today I'm going to be showing you the steps of how and why I start my track ideas writing the drop first, and why I believe you should begin your ideas this way too. So stick around and I'll explain what I'm doing along the way, and feel free, of course, to drop any questions you may have in the chat and I'll do my best to answer them. So without further ado, let's dive in. So I thought I'd start by just quickly describing what is the drop in electronic music, what is the definition of the drop. I sort of asked the internet what it would tell me, and of course it printed off this huge list of things about what is the drop in electronic music. But I think to get the definition, we can zoom right in on this particular line here. In summary, a drop in electronic music is a sudden, intense release of energy and sound, typically occurring after a build-up section, categorized by changes in rhythm, bass line, and overall sound. It's now widely used, that's the drop, to describe the specific musical moment where the energy and excitement reach a peak. That's what I want to sort of focus on right there, the energy and excitement and peak. Those are the kind of words I use when I'm sort of coaching others or setting out to do my own tracks and starting my own ideas. I'm thinking about writing the peak of the song. All right, so let's have a quick test here. Hopefully already our microphone is absolutely fine. I've got a track here of mine, so let's just have a little playthrough, make sure we've got some audio coming from there, and we'll also use it in a second just to reinforce this writing the drop. So it's all looking and sounding good this end, hopefully the same at your end. So what we can always do with reference tracks or looking at full songs like we've got here, this being one of my own, we can kind of see the waveform of the track, and if we were thinking about whether it's my track or somebody else, where did that person begin kind of writing that idea? Where did the musical idea, it doesn't matter if it's tech house, techno, house, deep house, where did they sort of begin, and why might they begin there? And that's what this video is about. Sort of, you know, if I can stress the point that something I learnt along the way making tracks that gets you much faster from a loop to a track is kind of focusing in on that concept of writing the drop, the peak energy of the track first, and then you'll find that everything else kind of falls into place. That is a loop becoming a track. And so if we sort of go through this track structure and form, we kind of arrive somewhere sort of where I stop the playhead. Somewhere in this 8 bars here, we've kind of got probably the peak energy of the track, and it's just happening before this main sort of break section here. And if we sort of carry that loop to the other side of that main break section, our track comes back in with the same sort of emphasis. Now, of course, this changes from project to project, track to track, but I think the thing that probably shouldn't change, in my opinion, is that, you know, a great place to start is writing the drop and that max energy section first. Again, just to point out, you know, I've come across a lot of people that are over here kind of writing the intro first, or they're thinking about what's going to happen in the very first 8 bars, or what's going to happen at the very end of the track over here in the outro section. And it's really just kind of, you know, a bit of a waste of your energy and productivity and efficiency, because you're going to be doing something that will kind of almost write itself when you've got this peak area and max energy section of your track. Because after all, once we have those 8 bars or 16 bars, we then can break that down and build that up, and that's our storytelling that we might then do across the course of this track here. So that's enough of that for now. Let's get stuck into doing a bit of music. If you're here with me in the live stream today, do say hello in the chat. Let me know where you tuned in from. Of course, drop any questions in there if you have any, and say hello to each other if there's a few of you in there, and let's just have fun. Also, that's really important, making the kind of drop your focus and that max peak energy section. It should be fun as well. We shouldn't be getting bogged down thinking about what's going to happen at the very, very start of our track, which I don't think is all that interesting. Let's get straight into the most interesting section of the track and write that first. So I'm thinking today to do a little bit of tech house. We'll close this track up and let's bring that down. We can minimize it so we don't have to look at that anymore. Let's give ourselves another audio track. Let's change our tempo to, maybe we'll go sort of 128, get into the modern kind of house type, tech house type territory. And what we might do today is actually work in the arrangement view. The concept doesn't really change too much in terms of the objective here, writing the peak, max energy, the drop. That doesn't change too much. We can just see the project a little bit differently. So most of the time you'll see me start over here, and session 1, the scene 1, should I say, up the top here, this line of clips that would be in scene 1 is effectively going to be my max energy peak loop. Again, the drop. So, you know, maybe I even go here if I'm working the session view to scene 1 and I write the drop in there already. And that's going to be my focus of that very first scene I'm going to develop. And then I might do scene 2 might be a break. And then another scene 3 might be a variation of that. Let's say we do the build. That would be 3 very, very useful scenes to have over here in the session view of the main loop, the drop, and then a build loop, and then a break loop that could then start from this view how we're going to go from a loop to a track, right? Whereas if we're over the arrangement view, we can do that nicely as well in here with some markers. So we can drop a marker here at, let's say we start on bar 5. I don't generally start on the 1. I like to give myself a bit of space in case I'm recording things. That's going to give me a little bit of lead time in. And let's say in here, we're going to call this the drop. Let's, the ROP. It's pretty funny. Let's call it the drop. Actually, let's move it to 9. And then let's put another marker on the 5. And then what we can do in this area here is we could name this then the build, which is generally going to happen before the drop. And then we could have after this a break, right? So we can use those markers to kind of create those nice sections for us. And if we want to do a cool little trick, actually, let's just bring an empty MIDI track up to the top here. It doesn't really matter. And let's put a MIDI clip in the length of those sections. So literally, I'm just going to draw through the mouse the length of those 8 bars, right? Actually, it's 4, so sorry, getting a little bit out of whack there. So let's move this all across. That's a little bit better. So now we've got our 8 bars. That's the sort of size of the loop. Again, you could work in 16 if you wish, but I'm going to work in 8. So Command-Shift-M on a Mac or Control-Shift-M will give us a MIDI clip directly in there, and we can call that the build if we like, right? And just think of these empty MIDI clips here. They're going to be like a placeholder, and what it means is it's quite a useful little thing. We can literally loop the project up really easily with those, right? And we could also color them with a little bit of different energy levels. So let's say I think our drop here in the middle should be red, peak energy type stuff. The break could be blue. It's kind of cooling things down a bit. And the build, again, we're getting excited on the way to the drop. So let's say it's either kind of, you know, that kind of bright orange or yellow or something along those lines, right? And then below here, we're just going to start a little bit of a music idea. So as I said, thinking tech house, Let's have a kick drum rolling perhaps. And yeah, let's maybe do that for starters with a drum synth kick. And we can drop in a bar of MIDI here. Let's put in some 4/4 kicks just to get us up and away. Again, a lot of this, when you're sort of starting a new music idea, I'm not going to fuss too much about the kick just for now. I just want to get that in. It's almost kind of my metronome. It's just going to get me vibing a little bit. It gives me the feeling of 128. Perhaps I'll change my tempo up and down, and just a little bit of a compass for now. I'll worry about samples and other things, or switching this synth out, maybe adding some more ghost notes and groove to it in a little bit. But for now, we've got something that can give us a little bit of a pulse, and that's really all it's there for now. Okay, so I'm thinking after that pulse, thinking to do a bit of a kind of lead bass hybrid, maybe as kind of one of the first things in here. I also have a vocal in mind to use in today's track. Let's have a listen to what that sounds like. So let's go into here where we've got some sort of vocals we can use without any problems or issues with copyright, etc. Let's have a listen to this one.
This is where I am not anymore. This is where I am.
So it says it's in 120 BPM in the key of D major. So maybe what we'll do just for a quick second is we'll just drop our global tempo back to 120 BPM just as we drag this in. So we kind of point Ableton to that original tempo a little bit, just so that perhaps that will be beneficial in the sense that both the software and the recording agree that it's 120 BPM as the original recording timing or tempo of this track. So let's have a listen to that. We'll just stretch our kick across. We'll pop on the metronome, or we can try it first, just the kick.
This is where I am not anymore. This is where I am not going.
Yeah, it's sounding pretty good. Let's try it with the kick off and the metronome on.
This is where I am not anymore. This is where I am not going with you.
So it's got a bit of processing on it, which could be nice to kind of cut some of that away. Would have been nice to have it a bit drier because I want to do something with it in a little bit, but we can work with it as it is, I believe. We'll find out in a little bit. So let's color it a different color and just put here, that's the Vox we're going to use for today. And now we can go back up to 128 where I was thinking shouldn't cause too many artifacts or anything on this vocal. Let's have a quick listen.
This is where I am not anymore.
Let's put it in Complex Pro.
This is where I am not going with you. This is where I am. It's not the way it goes. This is where I am.
All right, so we've got that up and running. Let's also just put over here a limiter, just in case we get a little bit low on the volume and we need to boost that a little bit. By the way, I'm working in 12.1, which is now public, so we can see if that is something that's new to you. We will see here the reface limiter. It looks amazing, is amazing. If you're wanting a little bit of a background video on how to use Ableton 12.1 or what was new in that software, I'll put a link to a card either here or here. And I've done a little video where I broke that down in a live stream, a previous live stream, where I just went through what is new in 12.1 and the benefits of it and how to use it. So limiter got refaced. Super nice. It finally brought the Ableton limiter to a level that we've wanted, I think, for a while. So let's just have a look here. So we're sitting at around -6, so it shouldn't be too quiet over YouTube, but we'll just give it a little couple of dB here. Maybe we'll go 3.
It's not the way it goes. This is where I am.
Yeah, so we'll bring it down to 3. That'll give us a little room to work. But it means for you folks in YouTube, you get a decent output of levels. All right, so we've got a vocal in here now. Interesting idea. It's now warped effectively, doesn't need a lot of quantization or anything. It's sitting quite nicely timing wise. There's a little bit of variation in some of the sections, but don't think we need to worry about that too much at this point in time. And we'll check a bit later if that's the right key. So let's say that we're going to do some sort of maybe hybrid bass type pluck leads kind of hybrids with a bass, perhaps something like that. So let's see about writing that. So let's start with maybe, again, sort of something like 4 bars, and we'll stretch it out in a moment. We're in 16th notes, that's fine. Let's maybe say, if this vocal is D major, the relative of that we can figure out, by the way, if you ever want to figure out the minor relative of a major scale. So it's saying that it's D major, so we're in the key of D, this vocal. We can literally, to find the minor, go down 3 semitones. So we just need to count 1, 2, 3, and we land on B minor. So in theory, B minor would work with D major if it is in D major, and also we can also try D minor as well, as there would be some overlaps. And that's what we call the relative and parallel minor, basically. So D minor, D major, that's the parallel, and the relative is the minor of the major, which in this case is B, by counting down 3 semitones. So if you want to do that, go find your major or find the minor. If you're in the minor key, you go in reverse. So for an A minor, and we count 3 semitones up, we arrive at C major, and that's actually absolutely perfect. So just think, if you're in A minor here, you can just count. You don't count A as a 1, it's 0. You count all the keys, 1, 2, 3, and you arrive here, and there's our relative. Handy little tip to know if you store that in your head, as it's something, as I said, very quick way to find what is the relative. So here we're going down to find the relative minor of D major, 1, 2, 3, and it's B. So let's say we start in B minor, and let's do a little bit of a program pattern today for something different. And let's do sort of dotted 8th notes. We'll start with that. So we're kind of following, spacing things out with a couple of spaces in between each note. And to be honest, we can just do that for a bar, and then copy that across. Right, that takes us all the way across to the end here with that kind of spacing. Although, hang on, we've got slightly different spacing at the end there. But we're going to put in a few different, elements just to get a little bit of groove out of that as well in a little bit. So let's pop onto that, some sort of synth sound. Maybe we'll go, should we have an Ableton preset perhaps, just to get something going, and then we might design our own sound here, I think could be fun. So want something like a bit of a lead. So maybe this Train Dream Plucks could be good.
This is where I am.
Let's have a listen to it in B minor and in D major. So this is B minor. Yeah, it definitely sounds like D sits there quite nicely. B's a bit tense. So what we might already actually do here is have a little play around with the vocal for a second with a little trick that I wanted to try and do. So basically the rhythm of that pluck I'm happy with already. That was kind of going to be the kind of feeling of the rhythm of it. Let's give it a little bit of velocity randomization. Let's add a bit of groove. And then let's have a little bit of a pitch change or two in here. So let's maybe say we use the octaves as well. I'm back in D, by the way, in D major, but we're going to play around with the key in a little bit. We'll transpose this to where we end up. But for now, we're in the root of the vocal, let's say.
This is where I am not anymore. This is where I am.
And now I'm going to use like a few notes from, so this is an octave of D. Let's say that if we were making the chord D the root chord, we would have these three notes available to us, the third and the fifth. And so let's say that we kind of build some little fills around with the third and the fifth, and then we might use something outside of those two as a way to kind of create a little bit of tension. So let's try that. So maybe here we'll go up to the third, the fifth, and then maybe we'll have something like a 6 in here as a little bit of a going up sort of bit to the pluck at the end here.
This is where I am.
Turn around.
Not anymore. This is where I am. Not anymore. This is where I am.
Could also try this on the 4 or the 2.
This is where I am. Not anymore. This is where I am.
Right, and if we transpose this down to B minor, we're still okay. It's just basically changing the pattern a little bit, or the tonality of that, as it would be one. Yeah, I'm still using the octaves and the different chord shapes, the different intervals, but we're just transposing it to potentially B as the root and aiming for a B minor. I'm in A, sorry, one. So let me fix that.
This is where
Okay, now let's try that.
This is where I am. Not anymore. This is where I am. Not anymore. This is where I am. Not anymore. This is where I am.
Maybe I'll switch off some of the processing in this particular pluck, or as I said, we'll actually make our own in a little bit so we can get it to sound the way we want. So I've just disabled the kind of spatial effects for a second, but you can also open up the instrument in the show and hide section here, and then you could deactivate some of the mapping and depth that's going on in here. We could turn off this whole kind of rack over here, for example, if we wish.
This is where I am.
Then it sounds much more neutral, but I'm thinking to sound design this out a little bit in the future, but that's a nice sound to get it started.
This is where I am. Not anymore.
And the B's a lot more tense, as you can kind of hear. So we're kind of with the relative minor. If we go back up to the D, we're thinking to use the root key of the vocal.
This is where I am. Not anymore. This is where I am.
So let's stretch that out.
Not anymore. This is where I am. Not going with you. This is
So now we maybe can layer in something like a bit of a bass. So let's maybe try and see what happens when we do something that I want to do. So we've got this kind of pluck lead idea here. Let's call it the, well, actually bass lead. That's kind of the idea with it. It's a bit of a hybrid kind of sound. Mess around with it a bit more in a moment, but we've got a kind of drop length. We also might have just this at the end instead of repeating every 4 bars, so might also just make that a bit more neutral here. Hang on, do that again. Okay, so let's split this. That will help and we don't mess that up. Okay, so we've got a little bit of a rhythm change at the end of that 4 bars, but we've got the kind of rising, we'll say arpeggiated section of the pluck at the very end there.
This is where I am not anymore. This is where I am, not going with you. This is
Okay, so we can use these MIDI clips up here to get our loop back in shape. Great. So let's come in here and maybe just write again something new in here. Do say hello if you're in the live stream with me. Do drop a comment or say hello in the chat. And if you've got any questions, please ask away and I'll do my best to answer them as we go along here. So let's try a trick here with the vocal. Been wanting to do it a few times here. Let's have a new MIDI track. And let's put on that MIDI track something, an instrument of sorts. Let's have maybe the just Ableton's default grand piano, perhaps, something like that. Let's grab that out of the folder here, bookmarks instruments. Let's drop that on there. Okay, and then let's, I mean, ideally this vocal, if it wasn't quite so, as processed as it is, it would be really cool to have it a bit drier, but it's workable, I think. Doorless House Music, I need to start the whole lesson over. I just woke up. No worries. We haven't got too far. We're just basically going over today the concept of, you know, how I think you should start your music ideas, which is writing the drop first, and why that kind of makes sense rather than getting distracted and thinking about intros and outros and other song sections at the very beginning. So up here, we're kind of focusing in on an 8-bar drop, getting our music idea together, and then we're thinking, well, once we get that together, how easy that would be then to tell the rest of our story and come up with other sections of our song, such as the build and the break. So you haven't missed out on too much at all. And welcome, by the way.
This is where I am.
Okay, so let's bring the vocal up to the piano track. And it's going to ask us in Ableton, do we want to convert that to MIDI? And the answer is yes. We're going to go for a melody here. All right, so this is what Ableton thinks is the vocal melody, and it's kind of, you can apply this trick not only to vocals, but to synth lines or guitar lines or pad lines. You know, ideally though, the less processing on it or doubling or harmonizing of whatever you're trying to ask Ableton to interpret the MIDI, the easier and cleaner it's going to have, you know, a go at figuring that out. This doesn't look too bad, to be honest. So let's have a little listen to that so we can have the piano together with the vocal here.
This is where I am not anymore. This is where I am, not going with you. This is where I am.
So there's a bit of a bad note up there.
I'm not anymore. This is where I am, not going with you. This is where I am. It's not the way it goes.
Yeah.
This is where I am. It's not the way it should go.
So if you were giving that a mark out of 10, I think you'd give it probably somewhere in the middle there. It did a decent job. We can hear a few notes are a little bit out of whack. And what is interesting is if we sort of zoom out a little bit here, and we look at, let's just pick on a bit of a section that maybe is quite good.
This is where I am. This is where I am. I'm not anymore.
That sounds bang on, this sort of section here that we just heard. Here's a little bit strange, but yeah, at the end of the day, if we look at the sort of main notes that it feels like it's playing, it does seem that D is important here, as well as E a little bit, spending quite a lot of time on the E as well. And if we kind of listen to the phrasing of the vocal,
This is where I am. I'm not anymore.
so here
This is where I am. I'm not anymore.
it sounds good as well on the piano, like it's resolving kind of here. So what can we sort of interpret from this a little bit? Do we, if we were to put D major in as our scale up here, and then say fold to the scale, well, as you can see, there are notes that are incorrect if we were in D major, which is the labeling of the vocal. It says it's in D major, but this is not really working that well, right? There's at least 3 notes there that are outside of the scale, the F, the C, and the A, right? Anything that's not purple, anything that's not a highlighted key is out of scale. So we've got 4 here if it's D major up the top here. If we put it in B minor, the relative of D major, we have again 4 notes out, right? So I'm not sure that I agree completely that it is D major. Let's say that this particular, as I said, conversion by Ableton is reasonable. I mean, as I said, I think it's got a few notes wrong.
This is where I am. I'm not anymore. This is where I am.
So we can kind of, I would say, mute this note, that top note in a moment, but let's try something here where we basically take all of these notes here and we could put the global key scale awareness back to C major, and we're actually going to try and see if we can figure it out for ourselves, or see if we can kind of experiment a bit here. So if we think D's an important note here, let's try transposing this melody up and down a bit. So if we put it onto the C, we've now got ourselves down to 3 notes not being in key, right? So if we're now sort of saying we're in C major and this is the root note, we've got 3 notes that are out of key, so we've got a little bit closer. What about if we put so if we put this back up to the D, what about if we try the E here, which I think is also a strong note as part of the vocal melody. If we move that down to the C, we're still with 3. So that's sort of thinking of it in a major scale sense. So what about if we put this back up to where we've got this row of Ds, and now we go down to the D or the E, we're going to put them on A and sort of say like A would be the root, like A minor. So that's looking pretty good. So if we put that D onto the A, we've only got 1 note that's out of place here, right? So that's not a bad move at all. And if we go back again, put that back on the D, and we now say, okay, the other strong note of vocal melody, which was the E, if we bring that down and put that on the A, again, we've just got this 1 note out of place. So that's pretty useful. So if I kind of mute that 1 note at the top here, and we think our tonal center is E. So just to refresh that, let's put that back. Let's go back up. So, sorry, let's select all the notes. So let's go back up here. And there we are with the original scale, right? As it's been converted, the harmonic conversion of the vocal melody. And we're sort of transposing it up and down a bit here. So if we look at kind of, as I said, if we think E and D were important to the vocal melody, they are strong notes, a lot of time spent on them in the vocal melody. If we bring that E down, which was the last thing I did, and make it the A, we've already got 1 note out of place. So I'm thinking E minor could be quite a good key maybe to set everything up in today. So I'm going to zero out these notes that are out of scale. So now everything else is kind of in the scale of A minor for a moment. And then what we need to do, one last trick here, is we're going to need to use the pitch MIDI effect device. So if we grab that, and we're now going to put that in front of the grand piano. And what we're going to do with that is, if we're looking at the piano roll, we've moved all of the vocal melody down into A for the moment, but we sort of figured out that it's E minor, right? So all the notes are on white keys only, so we can easily kind of see in A minor, that's the wrong note. But now we want to put it into E minor as the key, and we're just going to use the MIDI pitch device to do that. And E minor is either 1, 2, 3, 4 semitones above A, or you could be going the other direction, 1, 2, 3 semitones down, right? So if I go over to the pitch melody MIDI device and we put it 4 semitones up, now all these MIDI notes here are sitting in white notes only in A minor scale, but they're actually playing the root of E. So let's move them up an octave. That's not going to change anything. And let's take away this one note that's out of scale, or it's muted, but let's delete it. Then we can put the scale back on, and you can see now we're all in scale.
This is where I am, and not anymore. This is where I am, and not anymore. This is where I am, not going with you. This is where I am, it's not the way it goes. This is where I am, it's not the way it should go. This is where I am.
So there's still a few notes in there that need massaging. We wouldn't want to use them all, but the idea might be to come in here and grab some sort of little bit of a motive from in here. That's what I was thinking to take. I'm not going to sort of copy this whole vocal melody and use the whole thing. I think come back and revisit it in a little bit and see if we can get something, you know, nice out of there. And also with the E minor, as I said, we could also go and access the lower E here by going 3 semitones down. So if we play that back.
This is where I am, and not anymore. This is where I am, not going with you.
That sounds pretty good to me. Apart from, as I said, the
It's not the way it goes. This is where I am, it's not the way it should go.
All right, so what I'm going to do with using that, as I said, maybe I'm going to come in here in a bit and search out for sort of something that I can use like this, like a little melodic kind of motive from that. Also, it's now given us like a bit of a scale to work with for today. So we're going to come back up to this kind of pluck bass hybrid sounds here, and we're now going to put it on the root of E, and that's going to be the key we're working in today, right? So now we have that's kind of set a little bit in terms of a key, and what we might just do is just with the pluck here. So we've got our root E, we've got an octave we've accessed here. Just with this, it needs to change slightly. So I wanted to use kind of notes from the triad a bit. So let's have, if we were building the chord 1, so let's zoom into this area here. Chord 1 is, yeah, still in correct positions actually. Sorry, I was about to make a mistake there. So if we were to put this all in a line, that is chord 1 is right there. So I'm just sort of breaking that triad up into this little kind of fill at the very end here. And that is working when we put it back. Okay, perfect. Like so. Now that's better. Hang on, we'll try this again actually. Sorry, I have a little bit of a tool hiccup today. All right, so finally, there we have our pluck, kind of how I wanted it.
This is where we end. Not going with you. This is where I am.
You know, so if you're listening to the piano, as I said, keep in mind that's not going to be there in a moment. It's just was to figure out a little bit, change keys, get everything to kind of, I think, glue together nicely.
This is where I am. And not anymore. This is where we end. Not going with you. This is where I am. It's not the way it goes.
Yeah, so there's a wrong note there. That definitely doesn't sound right in this area here. But we could also potentially try copying this one, which sounds a little bit better, and bring it over to the front here.
This is where I am. And not anymore. This is where we end. Not going with you. This is where I am. It's not the way it goes.
Yeah, so if we just stop that there, these guys here, if they come down maybe to the A, these two notes here. Also, that copy and paste was okay, but maybe we undo the copy and paste and go back and just redo also this section a little bit individually. But like I said, kind of have an idea for that. We'll come back to it in a moment and see what we get from it. But it's not far off, just needs a little tweak or two. But all of the sort of work done so far means it could be something we could use, right? Which I think is useful. So let's say we mute that track. Also can mute the vocals for a second, or we can have them in the background, so it doesn't really matter. So
This is where I am.
let's work on a new part for the track.
Where I am.
Let's have something like a bass stab. So now we can put a global scale up here. We're in E minor. We've kind of settled that up. Went about it a bit of a different way. We just, you know, use this vocal, try to figure out what's going on. D major, actually, funnily enough, had 4 wrong notes, right? So interesting. Perhaps, you know, the key detection on that vocal wasn't well done. Well, we've kind of done it ourselves, and it's all sort of sounding actually quite pleasant. So let's say we get chord 1 here as an idea on the very first triad here. And I'm thinking here like a bit of a bass stab would be the idea of the sort of sound I'd be going for. So maybe we grab ourselves something like an operator for a moment. Drop it onto there.
This is where I am.
Let's bring it down.
This is where I am. 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 This is where I am.
So let's have a bit of delay sort of on that straight away.
This is where I am. 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 This is where I am.
So not as frequent as that. So let's spread this out so that it's just going to come in every sort of 4 bars or something like that. And I'm going to process it a bit more in the future as well. So it's going to be kind of a little bit wonky. And perhaps in the second 8 bars here, we could have another chord from the scale. So as they are split here, we could go for another triad that would be sympathetic to the E minor we're working in. Triad 2, triad 3, triad 4, triad 5, triad 6. So we don't have a chord progression going on here, but I think I'd like to work within some of those tolerances. I'm probably not going to use chord 2 for the moment. So we could have something like Maybe we do a 1-6-4 chord progression or something like that in a little bit if we do have some sort of sustained type chords in this. So perhaps we do a 4 or a 6 here in the second 4 bars. But I would also bring this triad down. Just let me get the triad correct. So let's play, skip, play, play, skip, play. So that's our triad there. And I'm going to invert it, I think. Yeah, so let's have it as a chord inversion. Okay, so let's try that as not the 6. Let's try it as the 4 chord, which is a minor chord. It's a little bit better. Yeah, I think nice and low like that could be cool. Obviously that's funny, but bear with that because that will become something later. I think it's going to give us some cool parts to work with. So we're moving along here. Let's say that we just bring in a little bit more drums here. So let's do a Command F. Let's go searching for something like a clap and a one shot. See what we find. Kind of looking for something nice and short. That one could maybe work. This is where I Let's try this one here, and let's see if we can shorten it up in a moment in an envelope. And why not? We're working in Ableton. It's a brand new 12.1 public update. So let's actually put this inside the drum sampler as a new device that we have now. Love this device, by the way. We're probably not going to push it too hard today, but it's a great device. Like when I say push it too hard, that is sound design wise. Just kind of want to use it a bit more conventionally here. So let's drop that clap in there. Let's get ourselves, we can copy the kick MIDI down and then move it across into the clap position. Let's say we've got a middle note that we don't need, so let's zero that one out, and then we've got ourselves a bit of a basic clap pattern going along here. And then let's just adjust the transient at the start of the sample and the decay. And let's say that right now we don't have a swing in this track currently, but I think we could do with maybe also having a groove or a swing available to us. So let's clear all of this out and let's go and grab ourselves some different swings that we could use, and we can also kind of open up the groove pool. And by the way, if you're looking for where to open that up, just up in the top left-hand corner, you'll find the groove pool these days in Ableton 12's environment. So we're going to open that up, and we're going to look for some 16th swings, just sort of to have some options. We'll have, actually, we'll just try that again. Let's say we're going to use some of the Logic ones. Let's have something like a 57. Bit of a mild-ish swing, and we might have an MPC as well. That feels pretty groovy. 16ths are going to move the 16ths around, which is what I'm kind of looking for there. So I'm not looking at eighth swing or anything else, eighth notes. I'm looking at affecting the 16ths. Let's have a Logic, a couple of other Logic ones. Let's have 55, which is less. And then we might have a little bit more. It's a bit too much. Let's try 59. Okay, so we've got a few options here. Also, all of these you will see, actually, just an interesting thing while we're here looking at these different swings. I like to think of some of these as purely just swinging the notes, and some are a little bit more a groove, which is, I think, why it's called a groove pool, because a lot of these are grooves, not just swings. What do I mean by that? When you actually look down here, you might notice that some of them also will affect the velocity of the sound, as well as the actual moving of 16th notes around. So as well as swinging the 16th notes a certain percentage away from the grid, they would also apply a little bit of velocity to them. And, you know, it's something we can kind of look at in the future here. I mean, this clip here of these claps now, they don't have any velocity change at this moment in time. So let's kind of color this up a bit. Make it a clap. And if we open up our groove pool, so let's just make sure we can kind of access that here, right? And we could start to and if we say we pick on the MPC one, doesn't have any velocity change, it would just swing the notes. So if we were looking at this clip here visually, and we were to commit that swing, because right now it's just previewing in the background, if we're to commit it with this little arrow here, we've now would be, if we had the velocity attached, that would change the groove of that. But in this case as well, with the clap, we're not doing a lot, because we're not actually with a lot of 16th notes across the grid here. So we're not really swinging the 16th notes. If this looks like, let me give you an example. When we get our hi-hat in a moment, it's going to make a lot of sense. You can now see if we were to apply it. That. We are effectively, we get one of these that also has the velocity in it. So let's put up here, this one here. You can see if we were moving that, we could be applying a lot more velocity, or also applying the different timing, etc., to the notes. So you can actually do this in real time potentially as well if you wish, and apply it and make the velocity change from the groove pool here. So some of these, as I said, they're not only shifting the timing of the notes, but they're also being applied to the velocity as well. But I'll get an example of that going in a moment, because actually on this clap they're not really affecting a lot at all, because I'm only using the 2 and 4 hits at this point in time. Okay, so let's maybe try now. Let's consolidate that little operator, and this is just like a little stab that we've got going on here. And it is quite a low stab, so I'll just call it a low stab for now, so we kind of don't get confused. And then let's maybe say that we have in the drop some chords, but let's say we're going to make these chords probably quite rhythmical rather than sustained here. And maybe in the break or the build, particularly in the break, I think we could then have them sustained over in the break. So let's just have some simple chords here that should fit nicely in and around the vocal, and let's write them on the 1 as one of the chords. Let's have the 4 as one of the chords. So these are going to be the root notes of what I'm putting in here, and the 6. And then we can come back on the 4 or on the 1, or even finish off on the 6, but we've then got like a 4-bar chord progression here. So let's turn these into the triads. And we'll start with triads. Play, skip, play is the workflow here. When you're putting them in like this, we're playing a note, skipping a note from the scale, playing a note, skipping a note from the scale, and then playing a note. So there are our triads of the 1, the 4 chord, the 6 chord, and then the back on the 4. Could be any order of those, doesn't really matter. Again, if we just maybe drop a piano on it for a second, you can hear that. But they should be fairly sympathetic to this track. Wasn't really planning on any sort of fancy chord progression here. It's a bit of a tech house tune with some vocals in it. It's more about the pluck and the stabs and sort of perhaps a nice little rhythmical pattern from these chords. And they're not voiced properly yet, but if we put the vocal in, so if we come back around that last 4th chord there, it could be the 6. Leave that note back in the right place. Or we could be all the way down on the 1 again. So just the 3 chords of one of them repeated. Again, we've got to watch out for that other wrong note, just moving it down. Okay, so if we revoice these slightly, the triads, we can get them a little bit closer, but we could also make this 2nd chord here a chord extension. So we make it the 7th, it voices then nicely with the 6th chord, next door neighbor here. And if we were to add that extension, like play, skip, play, skip, play, we can turn that one into, again, and add 9 or add 7, in this case a 9. So you can add kind of, notes to the chord. If it's the 7th, it's down here. So let's make them all 7ths for a second. Listen to that. It's probably going to be a bit more fuller sounding. Again, I kind of like to try it for the moment, but I didn't want to take that one away. I do like this one probably with the 7th, just to voice it a bit better. Okay, and now if we do some inversions here as well, getting our voicings nice and glued together. Okay, and now I'm going to chop these into a bit of a rhythm. Yeah, the bass line should definitely be in key. We're in E minor, so the bass line is rocking out the E as the root. We've got a bit of an octave in there, and we've just broken up one triad as a bit of a fill at the end. So definitely we're in sort of E minor. The bass is very rooted to, it's pretty simple at the moment. It's just, yeah, using the root note of E minor plus an octave and a little bit of a fill at the end here. We might sort of expand it a little bit. So voice leading is my new obsession. Yeah, well, it's a nice way to chord inversions. A great way to think about voicing chords correctly is using extensions. So sevenths, ninths, 11ths, or inversions to try and get that nice voicing going across your chords, which is kind of what we ended up with here. There's a lot of common tones here. So by doing inversions in my case, it kind of really brought everything together with the common tones. And then we've got, you know, this nice kind of rhythm behind it as well. So house chord rhythms is my other nemesis. Yeah, rhythms take a little bit of practice, but, you know, don't be too afraid to try things around. You'll kind of hear when it comes to syncopating the chords. I think the thing you want to think a little bit about with rhythms is actually when what most people do when they're sort of doing chords or something like that, is they tend to make everything change on the beat, which by that I mean everything would be exactly happening on the beat or on the bar. And that's where things don't sound particularly interesting, right? So as soon as you get away from like having everything on the beat and you maybe make chords or rhythms or melodies change a 16th earlier, you start to get a little bit of spice and a little bit of interest. Also leaving rests like this, so leaving a 16th open and then it's starting on the beat, or moving it a 16th earlier. So if we were listening to just this simple little thing that we've got here now, as I'm explaining it, if we put it back here, nothing particularly interesting at all, right? But if we start to make things change a 16th earlier, maybe it extends all the way to the beat, or maybe there's a pause. Maybe this one starts earlier as well. So yeah, just getting a bit of a feel for syncopation and where things can live and where you can move them around to. But I think the first thing you could try and do is break away from, if that's something you come across quite a lot, is writing block chords or block melodies or block rhythms that just all follow the beat, and essentially the kick drum if you're making this kind of music. So you're essentially right, but if we start to sort of, as I said, kind of tweak that a bit, and we can start to get some interest here. So think a little bit about 16th and 8th notes. 16th are kind of like quite exciting when you move things around, so they change on 16ths instead of on the beat. And then 8th notes can also work, as can other note divisions, but perhaps just start with something simple like that and start to build from there. So hope that helps a little bit, but yeah, both those things are well worth practicing and spending time on, because getting your rhythms right can make a huge difference to how your track sounds, and also voice leading, so things are nice and smooth and you don't have big jumps. There's no big jumps in this little section here at this point in time. So let's loop up our drop. Let's come back there a little bit. Let's get a sound for this. So they take away a bit from the bass stabs at the moment as well. So we could try actually having the one in the chords come in a little later than where the bass stabs are, for example. So we could try that either without or with it a little bit slightly different rhythm. So let me leap that up. I think it's quite nice because I'm leaving space here for the stab. So I'll do that in the second bar as well, where I've got a stab, right? So that was just a great little upshot of a rhythm change there from just sort of playing around with that little idea, right? So if I split this clip, that's already going to work because it actually wasn't split, so it's copied over the same move. So let's just check that works here as well. So you have these notes up from the D, 1. Maybe not, we'll leave them down there, but we'll change the instrument in a little bit. Same with the grand piano, that wasn't the intended instrument here. So let's get a bit of intention on our sounds now. We'll work on those a little bit just to get the patterns, I think, are good. Now let's try and play around a little bit with the sounds we're going to use for this. So I'm thinking more a bit like an electric sort of piano type sound, a little bit of a nod to the old school. Let's try and work on these chords, the sound that's going to play the chords back. So let's get a little bit of velocity randomization into these program chords, let's say, so we can get them a little bit more interesting, a little bit more human feeling as well. Ooh. Just had a crash. Very interesting. Sorry guys, Ableton just crashed on me, so if you are in the stream with me, just bear with me. First time that's happened, which is rather interesting. So I'm just rebooting the software. Hopefully we will be back on track in a very short moment. Yes, we do want the set to come back. Very interesting. Perhaps there's a little bug in the background of 12.1, but yeah, that's first time that's happened to me. Definitely in a stream, but hey, it's in real time. These things can happen. Right, let's just do, in this case of that happening, we'll do a quick save of where we were. So let's save this loop up here. drop writing we can call it, and that way we just can reopen if we have any further issues. We can put it on the desktop, and yes, we can do that. We'll do a quick collect all and save, and okay. Don't know what happened there. Interesting. Shouldn't have really crashed considering what I was currently doing. Let's see how we get on. Right, so maybe no sound. So let's just quickly check our sound settings then. Okay, very interesting. So we've got audio there, but no audio coming out of the door. If you're actually in the stream and you can hear the audio, do let me know, but there's definitely no audio at this end. So let's maybe just have a quick change here for 1 second. Okay, so that's working. Let's just see if we've got an issue there with our routing. Yeah, we seem to have an issue there. Okay, let's do another quick check. Otherwise, the stream might be over before it began if we've got some sort of terminal type issue, but let's just have a look. But interesting, starting with a crash from Ableton Live. Let's just bounce away. Yeah, why did it crash? And what was the reason behind that? We don't know. There we go. Yeah, very weird doorless house music indeed. That was rather strange. Anyway, we are back, I believe. Definitely back this end, so let me know if you're still there and it's back your end as well. I'm good at this end now, doorless house music, so hopefully you are as well at the output end. Yeah, well, it kind of has rebooted, but now I'm getting the outputs this end and it sounds like it's outputting across the, let me just check. Yeah, looks good. Should be working now, I believe. Yep. So we're good to go. All right, so let's get back on track there and see how we're getting on. Got a little lost track a little bit. Great, thanks Doorless. Appreciate you being there. That's helpful for sure. So let me know. So what we do have on this bass sound is a preset, and it could be that that preset has a bit of tuning, detuning in it. When you asked earlier, was the bass in key? So maybe we'll just strip that away for a moment, that preset. It was just a placeholder really to get started. Maybe we'll have a wavetable here, just something simple. So that's sounding pretty good to me on the pluck now. Nice. Yeah, I think there was a bit of detuning there, so well spotted for your ears. There was something on that patch. I mean, as I said before, the other melodic stuff got in play. That was a sort of placeholder sound just to get the pluck going at the start of the video today, but in the end it may well have had a bit of detuning on there. And for me, I like making my sounds. If you do follow this channel and watch the videos, I like making my own sounds, so I kind of, yeah, have taken that away for that out of the way now for now. So yeah, FM basses, very, very nice. We've got FM on this chord track at the moment. try these up an octave as well, perhaps. No, I think they're good where they are. Alright, so let's see if we can get some little motif out of this melodic, the vocal melody that I grabbed before, or asked Ableton to convert over, and we've kind of found there's, it led to some interesting results. It led to us working in E minor. It was claiming it was D major, didn't really seem to add up to that, or at least Ableton's interpretation of the MIDI. So we've got this kind of little harmony idea here. Let me copy all of that over so we don't lose that. That's kind of the original interpretation from Ableton. There's a few wrong notes in there, but I was looking really today just to maybe steal something from it. So kind of take it all away and just see if I could get sort of some little kind of interesting motif out of it. That could go with the vocals and stuff like that. So grand piano, you're going to go away from this track. I'm going to be using that. Again, maybe we'll just have something nice and simple in here for the moment, like an analog, or again, any of Ableton's synths are fine. Yeah, again, bear with me because that's obviously not going to sound quite right just to start with, but we're going to work on that. See if we can come up with something interesting from it. Nothing really exciting me there. Yeah, I quite like this, but maybe stretch this note out a bit here. Just something like that, just a little turnaround type piece. Again, remembering the sound is raw as well. So I like this little turnaround little idea, stealing from it. I am starting to modify this quite a bit here. Just was trying to steal again the rhythm, the little bit of the rhythm from it. I posted links to your stream on my social, but I think the yanks aren't up yet. Thank you very much to all this house music. Appreciate it. Yes, they will probably be on the replay side of things, I believe. Well, I think the only thing successful is this little piece that we've got here so far. But it might have just been easier to write that rather than try and take it out of the vocal melody. I mean, you have to go back to the start of the video to sort of see what happened here, but this was me converting the vocal that we've got today, this audio vocal, which isn't perfect because it has processing on it. It'd be better if it was clean. I kind of dropped that into the MIDI track with the instrument, asked it to convert the melody, and this is essentially what it came up with, right? Is what we're looking at here. And then with that, I've kind of played around with keys, tried to establish what the main notes of the vocal melody were, and it actually ended up leading us to, we've taken it from what it says D major into E minor. So we're just looking to see if there's something in there that could be useful. You can see how it defaults each time, like this is quite different here to this. Right, so yes, we've come a bit of a way with that. I was looking to see if I could grab something from it, but I'm not too bothered if I can't anyway. So let's do a few more things here. We might use this piece, again, very raw sounds. I'm just using raw sounds to get started. Let's maybe have some kind of a top loop or something as well, a bit of hi-hat type action in here. So we might just grab a top loop just for a bit of vibe. And then we can come back in a second to, again, maybe making some tops and percussions and stuff. Just looking for something like a bit of a shaker loop. Could be nice. Have that up there. Just to give ourselves a bit more groove as well. Try a bit of beat preserve on the transients. I think it sounds better full. All right, so this vocal, let's try it with that. Bring it into an empty MIDI track. So we get it inside a simpler. Let's put it in slice mode. And let's maybe copy the pluck MIDI onto there. I might use this as a sort of basic starting point. Select all the notes, we'll bring it up a couple of octaves. So we're up a little bit higher in pitch there. And then let's play around with how we're slicing up the vocal. So let's say we do it by beat. Okay, so we've got maybe somewhere we can work from, and then we can kind of move these pitches around there, just again to give me some sort of rhythm a little bit. So let's say we pick on this note here. Yeah, the raw sound of that little analog kind of little idea over here. Probably not going to keep that. The vocal chops kind of sound pretty cool. It's EFFCD the vocal, then EEDC Deca. Well, yes, this is just really, again, just if you're talking about what kind of happened here. But the vocal for me, as I said, what was kind of funny with it was when I messed around with it, like it was talking D major, as I said, and then it became, that meant that B minor could be the relative of it. But like I said, you know, if you look here, the kind of main notes are E and D, but it points that it could be D major. But at the start of the stream, looking at this conversion here by Ableton of the vocal harmony, if we put it in D major and put the scale awareness on, you can see that it actually has 4 wrong notes then. So it's not really a point where I wanted to start working from as it was like this. But as I said, if you pop back to the start of the video, you'll find how we ended up in a minor, E minor, which is what's kind of going on in the end with the rest of the key of the track. And I wanted to put it in a minor key anyway, which I think is kind of quite nice to have. Like, yeah, so the notes are in A minor, the MIDI notes, but the pitch is in E. So if we're looking at this conversion here, I've actually re-pitched, so the notes I moved into A minor, and then I re-pitched it with the MIDI pitch effect. Yeah, it's, I mean, also you need to feed it. So I'm just having a conversation here with Doris House. You need to kind of feed it the best possible vocal you can, clean and nice. And this particular vocal, it's cool, but it's has processing and stuff on it, so it's not the best example, but it still didn't do a bad job. But it's given me a catalyst to kind of get where we are so far, which is not bad really. And we've twisted the scale around and done a few funky things with it. So actually, yeah, it's not the worst result, I think. So what we might do is we might have a little bit of fun with this kind of bass lead sound that we've got, which is just a sawtooth at the moment in wavetable. And let's do a bit of labeling here. So we're going to turn these into pluck chords. Low stabs labeled up. Bass lead. This is now a vocal chop, kind of sliced up rhythm. So let me just get the chop on the end there, otherwise that'll be a bit confusing. And let's have another color on that as well, so we kind of separate that out. And if I'm going to bring that down in order of importance, it's going to come down a bit lower. Pluck chords can have a blue color. Bass normally for me is a red color. As I said, this is a bit of a hybrid bass lead was the idea behind it. I've also got a shaker in here now. Let's get that in a bit of a color combo that I know. And now let's sort of play around with the hybrid bass lead. Let's see if we can use our vocal for another level of madness or fun, however you want to put it. So let's group our sawtooth wavetable into an instrument rack, Command G to do that. Let's grab ourselves from Ableton's instruments, the granulator. Let's drag and drop that into here. Hey Norman, how you doing? Nice to see you here in the stream. Getting pretty close to wrapping today's stream. It's been a bit of an interesting one. We've had a crash in the middle of the session and a reboot, and yeah, some little fun challenges along the way. Also myself having a bit of a, seems like a technophobe day, a little bit of struggle with the tech sometimes, but we do get those days. This is all in real time, so it kind of happens like that. So let's try the vocal into the granulator. and we're going to look for a bit of a layer here with the wavetable. So the wavetable at the moment is this bass pluck hybrid sound, which sounds like this. Simple sawtooth with a plucky envelope in wavetable. Nothing fancy going on at the moment at all really with it. So let's see if we can layer it with the granulator and find something interesting in here. So we're going to need to tune it a little bit, that's for sure, because it's borrowing the same MIDI notes. So what we'd have a couple of options here. If we take it out of the rack and we layer this as a separate instrument, so one thing we can do is have it in with the wavetable grouped, and then we would need to sort of figure out the granulator and it's working in pitch with the wavetable and they're sharing the same MIDI notes. I think that's the key thing, right? These are the what actually happened there? Sorry, I'm on the wrong track, am I? Yeah, that's better. So the pluck chords, that's fine. I didn't do any changes there, thankfully. I just opened the wrong MIDI. As I said, having a bit of one of those days today. Norman, tell me about, I've been setting my live gear up so many wires, I felt like a master electrician. Yeah, I mean, you know, doing these things in real time, sometimes things go a little bit pear-shaped, like we say. But yeah. All right, so back over here, let's duplicate this track and let's change that idea from it being in the rack. So we're going to, on the duplicate, unrack this. So we're going to delete the wavetable. Still going to have the granulator. We're going to ungroup it. We're going to have the granulator on this track. And on the other track, we're going to do the reverse of that, remove the granulator, keep it as the wavetable, and we can ungroup that as well. The idea being that now with the granulator here, we can kind of mess around a bit with the pitch a little bit with the notes themselves. So let's go up a couple of octaves and mess around with that. So I'm looking for sort of a tone to make this lead kind of interesting, like that the layer comes from. And maybe we can take away as it's the copy of the MIDI that I put up there. So yeah, before we get down the rabbit hole with this rhythm and this MIDI here that I'm trying to use from the pluck lead, so it kind of plays the same notes and same rhythm, let's maybe just kind of see if we can figure out what is, again, we're having one of those kind of figure out the tuning type day here. What is the sort of sample point that I've selected here? What is it kind of giving me note-wise? What am I getting back? So what I'm doing here is our classic old school sampler trick here. Bang a MIDI note on a C3, make it sustained for a bar or so. So that's just going to play in the background. I don't have to hold my finger on a keyboard or anything. And then I'm going to grab myself a tuner. Hopefully we'll already get a note from the tuner readout. Let's see what happens when we do that. So we're playing a C in the MIDI. We know we're playing a C. There we go. And we're getting an E here, right? So what we need to do is tune that. And funnily enough, what key are we in? We're in E minor. So it's already in key. That's great news, right? It's playing a C though, and we're getting an E. So what we could do now is make this play a C, but the cool thing is that E is then already showing me again that I think I did a pretty good job choosing E minor in the messing around that I did at the very beginning. So let's maybe do this with a shifter, because in if you tune in the granulator, you have a shifter please, there we go. If you do the tuning in the granulator, you can do semitones, right? So I'll guide you through what I'm thinking here. So if I move the transpose in the granulator, you can see I can eventually get myself either down or up to a C, but I can't do the sense in here. I'm only dealing with straight semitone movements. So it's kind of a little bit easier for me over here to be able to fine tune using the shifter, get it into that nice green section there, pretty much. Doesn't have to be perfect, but it helps when it's quite close. And now we could do, well, E needs to be, you know, 4 semitones down to be a C, or in the other direction, 5 up to be, sorry, yeah, 6, 8 up to get the C, right? So now we've got a C note playing a C, right? So that's one way you can do that. And now if we put the other MIDI on there, well, when we're playing an E, the sample is going to be playing an E back, right? That's kind of what we're doing here. I know that doesn't sound particularly pretty, but using the shifter here is giving us the tuning we're looking for, whereas here we could have done the we could do the 8 semitones here and use the shifter, but you can see even then, even in the granulator, it's not quite right? It's a bit different. So I quite like using the shifter because it's pretty accurate. And this requires obviously a little bit of a difference. So I'm using the shifter post the granulator to dial in my C or my E. So I need to go back now. Okay, so now if we move that and we bring this back, in theory, whatever the MIDI's playing here, which it's an E, then we're getting an E back, right, from the sample that's in the granulator. Let's maybe pitch all this down, this lead. There we go. That's kind of the end goal. I know it took me a bit to get there. Thankfully, after all the issues today, hopefully you'll agree more or less that the actual music that's sort of coming out as the end idea of this, starting with the drop first, is kind of the bit that is the most successful, I guess. It's kind of the bit that's sort of sounding, I think, quite interesting, which is the goal here as well, is to write like a brand new idea from scratch. Really, it was just to say at the very beginning of the video that, you know, writing the drop first, if I can say, you know, if someone asked me in an interview, what are some of the things you've learned along the way? Well, it's not, you know, writing a track where you're thinking about what happens in the intro of that track or the outro. You're just getting straight into the nuts and bolts of the track. And as I said, the rest of the energy changes in the track and the storytelling and the builds and breaks, they're going to write themselves a lot from the parts that you have here in the drop, really. So just writing yourself a note, write the drop, the max energy, the peak of the track, focus on that, get that right, and then everything else kind of falls into place. So we've got a lot of the same pattern as well, because I've copied and pasted the sort of rhythms around, so we could definitely mess around with that a little bit as well, and perhaps write some new a new rhythm on, or a variation in something like the vocal chop. Or I think I want the granulator to follow the bass lead, so I'm going to keep the same MIDI there. It's the idea there for it to be a layer, right? That was the thought process there. Let's also have on this bass, I am going to group the wavetable on the pluck, the bass lead hybrid sound, and I'm going to use an analog in here just because I feel like this will get me quickly to the result I'm looking for. And I'm going to layer that with an analog, and I'm going to switch everything off in here pretty much, apart from actually adding the noise oscillator. So I kind of want to add, again, this is my main sound here now, which has got this cool, it's got the vocal from the track in a granulator, giving us a nice kind of vibey, unique synth sound as part of the layer. So these two are now a layer, right? That's a layer coming together. And now I'm going to do exactly what you just heard. Have some noise on the top of that. And let's make this noise, the ADSR, the envelope of it, very plucky as well. So we get that nice kind of bright noise on here, and we could do lots of automation like playing around with the transpose on the vocal as well. That could be interesting, like repitching it as well as it being sliced. We could also do that with the MIDI notes as well. Well, let's get something like some 909 rides in here, perhaps. There's a bit of a kind of extra groove here for where we would be wanting to kind of ramp it up a little bit. So we've got, again, some more energy in this area here. Let's just have some offbeat 909 rides, something like that, or 808 sounds. Let's try 909 ride cymbal. So yeah, now we're starting to cook a little bit here, and we've got this kind of FM plucky chords that we built this kind of chord progression around a bit here. Let's maybe get some auto pan on that, or some phaser or something, so we can flange it around a bit, get a bit of a movement into it. Yeah, so more or less where we're up to now, the next phase would be, you know, some sound design in here and getting things, little bits of feels and details and things in here. But the core kind of idea is more or less up and running here in terms of elements, and yeah, would be sort of getting in here, as I said, and working on the sound a little bit more. Let's maybe say on the bass lead, where we've got now noise from wavetable and the saw. I know you could do the noise, by the way, in the wavetable in oscillator 2, and we could change it from, so if you're wondering why I didn't do it that way, we could go basics and then choose the white noise from here, or we could even go to the noise section and choose all these lovely noises that you have here. But funnily enough, I just kind of prefer the noise tone of the analog, and I kind of know what's going on here. In terms of what I've kind of done with it here, and I can layer it and just kind of dial it in to do what I'm doing. So that's just a personal preference rather than you need to follow that. That was a choice that I kind of like the outcome of that. So let's use a little bit of frequency shifter on the wavetable. Let's use it in ring mod mode. Dirty it up a little bit. Can have a bit of width on that bass as well, depending on whether we're going to keep it as the lowest of the low basses. It does get pretty low, so in a mixing sense, probably best to keep it more mono than stereo, but if we added a little bit of chorus or something here, it could be interesting. Or some unison that I was just fiddling with there, or you could have perhaps a bit of chorus. And just bring a really small amount of that in, just to give it a little bit of spread. So this layers come together, I think, quite interestingly, and we can definitely mess around in here a lot as well with the granulator, having it touch the surface here. Right, could have all sorts of fun in there. Let's also maybe just try a very small amount of delay on this. Seems a shame not to use the drum sampler here on the 909 ride track, so let's hot swap just so I can get my sample back of the 909 ride. So I'll find it in a moment, but let's just switch that. We're in 12.1 here. Might have been the reason we had a crash earlier, but anyway, we've recovered from that. So instrument-wise, let's have the drum sampler in here, and then we're going to put our 909 in there. 909 ride. And then we can play around with that a little bit. There it is there. All right. Just an interesting kind of little sound design, a little bit of a different tone, just using a bit of stretch. Maybe I'll leave that off for now, it's a bit too much when I've got other things giving me the sort of dirt in other areas, but it's an interesting thing to play around with in here. There's so much that we can do in this area here, so in the future we'll do another sound design video where we take a look at this section. Yeah, lots of ways to modify your sound in the drum sampler. I love it. In the end, I'm using it pretty conventionally now. Okay, maybe a little bit of processing on the vocals. So as you can hear, the sounds sort of start to come together as we work on them a little bit. Let's also have a look at the kick. So we are in E minor today, and the kick is currently in F, and we don't have an F, so we could tune the kick to say G, as we're using just the drum synth kick here again. I sort of started with rough sounds, which I quite like to do just to get things going, and then we've kind of, you know, moved as time has gone on, we've kind of polished the sounds a little bit. Nice. So I think we've got a bit of a platform there. One thing I would do definitely if I was looking across here at the break idea then from this drop. So let's say we were, what are we going to keep over in this section here? So just 1 second, we need to loop this. This is where I am. It's not the way it should go. This is where I am. It's not the way it goes. This is where I am. It's not the way it should go. This is where I am. It's not the way it goes. This is where I am. It's not the way it should go. This is where I am. Right, so just, you know, this is what I mean about if you write the drop first, it's literally just like bringing some your sort of favorite things over here, how you feel the energy could come down into a break with what you have, trying a few things out and sort of modifying the drop into turning it into what would sound nice as a breakdown in energy from that. And as you can see, it can come together very, very fast, that pretty much. I mean, the one thing I would like to do here with the chords is originally this was what I was mainly thinking to have actually with the chords, is sort of a sustained chord like so. I'm going to remove a couple of these. So that's chord 1, and then some of these are inversions, we'll figure that out in a moment. So if we were going here to originally the 4th chord or the 6th, so we were playing the 1 chord, which we have here, the 6th, which is the D actually, right? And then we had the triad of the D, play, skip, play, skip, play. And then there was a bit of an inversion on that. So we can get rid of this harmonic rhythmic pattern here. So we kind of had this chord with an inversion, chord 1, chord 6. And then we had, again, another chord over here, which was 4. So we're going to move that up to the A, build that chord, play, skip, play, skip, play. One of these also, this one's in the wrong note, by the way. Maybe it wasn't the wrong note, actually. Check that in a moment. Okay, so yeah, you've got to watch out sometimes when you're doing inversions. So let's just put this back at the top for a second to make sure that I've got chord 6 correct. So let's leave it without inversions for a moment so we're not confused, or Heath's not confused. 1, 6, 4, and then I did go back to the 1, so literally I could take all of this away, bring this chord over here. So what I was thinking originally was to have, like, in the break, somewhere in the back of my head, a progression like this. And I know that one of these I ended up making the 6th into a 7th, so it had the extension on it. Helped me kind of voice it a little bit differently. So now we can revoice that. It smoothed out the voicing a bit. So sometimes, you know, those kind of extensions, etc., they can help you voice things quite nicely. In this case, we could have the B here if we want. Revoice those. So now we have this in the break. Let's bring it up an octave. So we can leave that B out if we like. And on the other side, we'd start doing a build, you know, and a snare roll and copying the things over to the left-hand side that we've got here in the drop that we built first, and then start building snare rolls and more energy. As I said, sort of this really gives you a natural pathway to those. And sometimes when you get bogged down with verse, chorus, and bridge and all these different technical terms, or builds and drops, just think about it like your track's going to be a story that you're going to want to tell for the listener, the dance floor, the people that are enjoying that music, however they're consuming it. And you want to tell that story, but you can also break it right down into just simple energy. A lot of tracks just simply, they don't have a real fireworks moment. They don't have lots and lots of lyric changes or lots and lots of melody changes. They're just sort of a changing in energy, literally, of sort of, you know, tension and release, tension and release. This has a bit of a combination of all of that, but we'll just come back to the drop for a second. And I kind of feel like this chop is great, but I kind of feel like one or the other should play at certain times. So I would definitely use the chop, and I'd definitely use the vocal. So what I mean by that, sort of maybe here in the drop, we're with the vocal and not the chop. Sounds quite nice and open. And what we could do is kind of have this over here, and we don't use all of it, and we work the chops in and around it. I think this track could really evolve quite a lot, and those two can work together, but I just think just plonking them and having them running all the time together isn't the answer, but we could do some good stuff. So, you know, lots and lots of possibilities here. So I'm not even really paying that much attention here, just giving ourselves some, you know, little view of what we could be thinking here. So yeah, options, right? So I just kind of feel like putting these two together here, it can work, but I think it's just a step too much. So I would think about how I'd fit them together at some point, or bring everything in and everything out. So here, the other way, we take the chop away and we go into this second bit of the vocal. But yeah, tough choices, but good choices to have, right? It's good to have these options up your sleeve, in the bank, whichever way we want to talk about it. So, quick little recap. We just started very, very basically with the Ableton drum synth, made a kick pattern here just to get ourselves rolling. Nothing fancy going on in there whatsoever. Very raw sound, but I kind of like getting a raw sound just to get rolling. I then made the pattern for this pluck lead. And the idea was it was going to be a hybrid bass kind of lead pluck sound. In the end, it's using, again, very raw sounds. It just has a sawtooth wavetable and an analog. We're stealing the noise oscillator of that. A little bit of pitch shifting, ring modulation on it, a bit of chorus, give it a little bit of processing. Then in the granulator below it, that did come much later. So what came next after the bass lead was this low stab. It's a couple of little chords from the key in the scale wind, which is E minor. And the E minor was kind of a funny thing how it came about, because the vocal originally says it's D major, 120 BPM. We agree on the tempo and the BPM, but I'm not sure about D major. Maybe it changes key within the sample, but I kind of converted the audio into MIDI, had a look at the stronger notes that happened when Ableton converted it, and moved them around a bit, and funnily enough, D major, a lot of the notes were wrong, so that was an interesting observation, and I wanted to write it in a minor key, this kind of drop, so I ended up feeling that E minor worked. There was only one wrong note when we transposed the MIDI up and down, and found, oh, okay, it fits in a E minor quite well. One wrong note, which we didn't need anyway. There's a few wrong notes in there, but E minor then led us to the pitch, key and scale of the track, and everything's written in E minor. That is the musical bits. And then I've just added some drums, some claps, shaker, a ride, some chords, which I built a little chord progression and revoiced it. The chord progression is just a very simple 1-6-4-1, floating around some nice easygoing notes that fit under the vocals, and the general idea quite easy. Vocal chop, cool little idea, copied the sort of pluck, I'm going to keep saying it wrong, the bass lead kind of melody down, and then actually drop the vocal into a simpler, put it into slice mode, and chopped it up a bit, a little bit of processing again, and then the vocal here has then also led us to another pathway, which the vocal's gone into a granulator and given us another synth layer, a unique sound, which also has a bit of processing on it. So if we listen to the main kind of lead, it's made up of 3 sounds. Pretty much all playing the same MIDI, but there's a little bit of a pitch variation on the granulator track. It's up an octave. There's a bit of processing going on. It goes with this low stab, and also with the kick. Let's put it back in the drop loop. And we just got a simple clap for the moment. Bit of a shaker, top loop. 9/0 ride, our pluck chords, vocal chop. And the main vocal. And maybe a really fun thing to do with this pluck chords here would be for maybe a bridge, or later in the track we could also use these again and actually arpeggiate them. So that could be an interesting thing to try. So we could drop an arp onto these block chords pretty much here. Let's try that. Yeah, so ideas, so it could morph into something as well, but not sure an arp fits, but again, we might sort of print that out and find a little motive in the arpeggiated pattern of those chords that could be useful. All right, well, thanks for sticking with me. Doorless House Music, great listen every bit. Well, thank you very much for sticking around. You were with me when things went a bit south. We had a bit of a crash in the middle here, not sure what caused that. And also I was having one of these days today where I was stumbling around a little bit, so apologies for that. But as the stream is in real time, those are the kind of things that go a bit with the territory of doing it this way. So I hope you have enjoyed the stream. If you're watching back on replay, I hope you find it beneficial. Just keep in mind, as I said, the main thing just to sort of drill in a little bit is write your drops first. You know, write the peak of the track, write that, and everything else will fall into place, and you'll go from making just loops to tracks before you know it, because you'll be able to easily strip down and build up that drop idea that you have. And you will see, you know, the videos on this channel. That's how I work. Pretty much, it's not something I'm going to suddenly change on you. Today I started working in the arrangement view. Normally I'm here with the same idea, and I did sort of start the video speaking about if I was doing it in here, I would be writing the drop, build and break in the 3 scenes up here. So literally, you know, we'd be taking all of these clips that we've got here, you know, and literally just bringing them over, and they would be, you know, living on, if we can line it up properly, you know, scene 1 up the top there would be the drop, and then, you know, the build and the break. We didn't have a build scene yet, but the break scene would be then living down here. So wherever we've got that new chords, there it is there, you know, that would be correct. That would be the break scene, right? The build scene would be on the top here, actually, like so. So, you know, that's how you can use the session view to kick all that off in this window, get very creative in here, and then bring that over this way, or back the other direction if you wish. So I'm going to wrap it right there. Doorless House Music, see you soon. Thanks for the tips and insight. Keep us posted. You're very welcome. We should be good to go again for next Sunday at the same time, 3 p.m. Central Eastern Standard Time. I'm located here at Ibiza, so yep, keep that one in your diary. And I will put a video here at the end here, somewhere left or right in the end card, let's say, that I'd really strongly recommend that you watch. If you've enjoyed this video, for sure you will enjoy the next video that I will put there for reference, so that you can follow this video on and go into something that ties into everything I'm sort of showing you here, particularly ones that I've done the loop and then it's become a track and it's become arranged. If you like the content on the channel, if you enjoyed the video, drop a comment, give it a thumbs up. It'd be much appreciated. Consider subscribing. Yeah, support the channel. All your support's much appreciated. Take care. Have a fantastic rest of your weekend, and we will see each other in the next live stream about cheat codes for house and techno music producers. Take care. Heath Home over and out. Ciao. Bye-bye. See you later.